Are we up? All right, well, good, welcome and good evening to the November 14th, 2013 Board of Selectmen meeting. Sorry for the delay. We were just trying to get organized here. As usual, we start with a reading of the agenda by the Town Administrator, David Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Caruso. First off, we'll start with a vote to approve or amend the agenda and add topics not necessarily anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance. Then have public comment, and then we'll go to Tom Gibson, the chairman of Middlesex County Retirement Board. And after that, Bob Delaney from SOS. And then at 7:30, we'll look at some administrative reports and then discussion about the day after Thanksgiving. And 7:40, signing of special state election warrant. And then we'll break into a selectman workshop about goal setting.
Great. Do I hear any amendments to the agenda?
No, I don't have any.
Do you have a movement to approve it?
Move to approve this agenda.
I second. Any other discussion? All in favor? Great. Paul stepped out for a minute. He'll be back. And he said to keep going. So right now we open up for public comment, if there's any public comment. Elliot? Yes, sir.
A couple of weeks ago, I asked you about the 2-minute limit and on speeches, and wondered if I could be put on the agenda for sometime in the next month or so, and we could discuss this with the town moderator and the town legal counsel, because I think it's unconstitutional to have that 2-minute limit. And I've been cut off when I've just started to hit the fan and be told your 2 minutes is up. So I say take the stopwatch and throw it in the river. Once I'm recognized, I should be able to speak as long as I like. And I want this discussed and I want it clarified so I don't have to take this to the town, to the state
So you can check with council and with the moderator, and then we'll see what.
Attorney General.
Yeah, we can respond on that, and some towns just let people talk until they've made their point, and then they'll cut them off as opposed to.
I'm wondering if we have any real role in that. We don't run town meetings.
No, we don't. It's a moderator
moderator
issue.
issue.
Is the moderator.
I'm not sure. I'm just not sure it's a. I mean, maybe it makes sense to have it aired publicly, and this could be a forum for that. But I don't think we have any say in how the meetings run.
Yeah.
The town meeting is a selectmen's meeting.
No.
Run by the town moderator. You set up the agenda, and it affects everyone. And
well, so David's going to check with the moderator.
I want to have this.
Get us a little more background.
I want to have this discussed.
Understood.
And otherwise, I'll have to write some letters to the state attorney general.
Okay.
Because I think it's unconstitutional, outrageous, immoral, unethical, and let's put an end to it right now.
Understood. Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, then we can move along to the core of the evening, which is Thomas Gibson. Tom, you're okay to be called Tom?
Yes.
Well, I really appreciate that you're here, and this is an interesting topic. It's the first time we've had someone like you come here and talk to Little Sherborn about this sort of thing, and a number of people have some great interest, as we do, to learn more. So we're looking forward to this.
Well, I'm happy to be here. We've been around for 100 years, and I think, although I haven't been around for 100 years, this is the first time I think we've had some representation out here before the Board of Selectmen. Yeah. And that's very important to the Middlesex County Retirement Board to have this outreach program to make sure that the facts about the public pension plan are out there, so that if there's going to be a debate, it'll be a healthy debate with all of the information out there. And as far as time constraints, gentlemen, please feel free to tell me when my time is up. I'm happy to relinquish the floor at any time. So I assume from Dave's reading of the agenda that I have some time. And
you have a good hour, and if you go over, we're probably likely to want to have you go over if you need to go over.
Well, before I start, I just want to say that Dave has contacted me and asked me to come out, and I know Dave from his prior positions, public service positions, and I know that he's on top of the pension world and keeps us on his toes at Middlesex and asks the right questions. and I'm happy to be here. I've given a lot of information. I don't expect that we'll go over it all tonight, but it's there, and if the board has any questions on anything that we have not covered, or we don't have time to cover some things, and they want more information, I'm more than happy to provide it, or even to make a return appearance out here at some
Great,
point in
'cause,
time.
yeah, I was gonna say, we may have questions, and it's a lot of material that you have to go
It
through. We
is.
may follow up with those
Right.
questions at some point.
So, some of the information may be well known to the Board of Selectmen, may not be well known to the audience or to the folks at home. So, we're going to cover a number of topics here tonight. And the first one, these are what we're going to review with the board. An overview of the retirement board, then a discussion of who gets into the retirement system and who doesn't. Our assets and our investments, where they're located and how we're doing. Retirement contributions from both the employees and the member units of the system. What our benefit payments look like. And then what the legislature has done over the last several years as far as pension reform. It's been in the news quite frequently. Whenever the newspapers seem to be bored and nothing to write about, it's always good to do a story on the public pension situation. And lastly, Social Security and the mass public pension. As you know, public employees in the town of Sherborn do not contribute to Social Security. They're not supposed to contribute to Social Security because we are an exempt state for our public employees in Massachusetts. So there are 105 retirement systems in Massachusetts, and we're all governed by Chapter 32, which is the general law that contains the retirement plan for all of the public employees in Massachusetts. The reason Sherborn is in the Middlesex County retirement system is because back in 1946, when the retirement laws were codified, the population in Sherborn was less than 10,000. And if your community's population was less than 10,000, you went into the applicable county retirement system. If your population was over 10,000, you were able to have your own retirement system for your employees. So there were 54 cities and towns in Middlesex County. There still is geographically a Middlesex County. There is no longer a governmental unit of Middlesex County. And of those 54 cities and towns, 31 of them currently are in the Middlesex County retirement system. Each retirement system has a 5-member retirement board. Excuse me. I'll get the hang of this eventually. I'm the chairman of the board. We have an advisory council member who's the town treasurer of the town of Burlington. He has been on the board since 1985 or 86, I think, longest serving board member. He's elected by the treasurers of the member units that are in the retirement system. We have 2 members who are elected by the active employees and retired members of the system. Ed McLean is a firefighter from the town of Burlington. John Brown is a fire lieutenant from the town of Wilmington. The appointed member was just appointed last Friday. Unfortunately, the incumbent passed away in October. Jim Gookin was his name. And we have 30 days to appoint a successor. We did a posting for the job, looking for letters of interest. And we reached out as well to individuals seeking their interest. And on Friday at a public meeting, the board appointed Robert Healy, who is the recently retired city manager from the city of Cambridge. So we feel Bob is going to be a valuable contributor to the retirement system, and we're looking forward. His first meeting will be next Tuesday, and he sort of had an orientation with me today, and we went over a lot of things. So we have a pretty well-balanced board, I believe, and I think we're going to do a very good job, and we have done a good job in the recent past overseeing our retirement system.
Can I ask
So-
you a question?
Certainly.
Are those members paid or unpaid?
There is a stipend of $4,500 that is payable to the board members. That is the local option that was approved by the advisory council to compensate the board members. I'm compensated differently as chairman of the board. Under the statute, the compensation of the chairman is set by the other 4 board members, and it depends on what the duties are. I happen to also serve as the legal counsel to the board, so my compensation is far in excess of $4,500. I'm compensated $11,000 a month by the board.
And that all comes out of the contributions, or is that state funds of some?
Oh, no, those are part of our operating expenses, part of our administrative budget. And it comes from our administrative, all the funding for the operations of the retirement system come directly from the return on investments, which we'll talk about in a minute. We meet every month. We post on our website the agendas. As I said, we're governed by Chapter 32. The board members are fiduciaries, so they have a very high level of trust with the assets and the benefits which they are overseeing. And the board's work is overseen by a state agency called the Public Employee Retirement Administration Commission, or PERAC for short. They audit us. We report to them. They have to approve our approvals on retirement benefits and things of that nature. So there's a system of checks and balances in place. So who gets into the system? Well, right now we have 9,000 active employees, 5,000 retirees or beneficiaries, and 3,000 inactive members. Those are folks who were in public service, contributed to the retirement system, left public service, but left their money in the retirement system and may return at some point in time or may not return. We have 71 member units, 31 towns, as I mentioned before, 20 housing authorities, 9 school districts, 9 water districts, and the Eastern Middlesex Mosquito Control Project, which is a separate governmental unit. I'm not sure if they make it out here or not, but it is, believe it or not, a separate governmental unit. The town of Sherborn has 74 active members, current employees. These are as of 1/1/12, the date of our last valuation. 39 retired members, including beneficiaries of retired members, and 33 inactive members. Those are folks who worked for the town, contributed, left their money in the system. 4 of those have what we call vested pension rights, in that they have either 10 years of service or they are at a certain age where they could come in at some point and say, I want to collect a pension. Or they may return to active service, or they may take their money out of the retirement system at some future time. So back in September 2010, we had to set some different rules for membership eligibility based on some changes to the law that the legislature had enacted, and also to allow some of our employers to be more flexible in hiring part-time employees rather than full-time employees. So we reviewed the issues, and we had a supplemental regulation which was approved through the legislative process. And in order to enter the Middlesex County retirement system, you must be regularly employed in a permanent job for a minimum of 20 hours per week and earn at least $5,000 per year. Temporary employees have to wait 6 months before they get into the retirement system to make sure they're going to stick around and not just get in and then get back out again. And if they do become a member and they have prior service somewhere else, they can purchase that prior service. If you work less than 20 hours, you're not in the retirement system. The town must put money aside under a federal act called OBRA. And employees, elected and appointed officials of all units who earn less than $5,000 are not eligible for membership in the retirement system. That's a change from the law as it had existed prior to 2009, when compensated elected officials could become members of the retirement system, and many did. And many were making very small contributions to the retirement system, yet were able to use subsequent employment to increase their pensions. The legislature reformed the law, said that elected officials could no longer get credible service if they made less than $5,000, but didn't say they couldn't join the retirement system. So you would ask, well, why would someone want to join the retirement system if they can't get credible service? In many communities, health insurance attached to membership eligibility in the retirement system, so the pension was not the major issue. Health insurance coverage was the major issue. So we adopted a supplemental regulation that said, not only can you not get credible service if you make less than $5,000, you can't get into the retirement system at all. So that was a pretty reasonable regulation that we adopted. And those refers to the OBRA, and of course, as I mentioned before, no Social Security. We still have some towns, unfortunately, some employers in the hinterlands of Middlesex County that mistakenly would enroll their employees in Social Security. And we are not a Social Security state. That cannot be done. That money would be lost to that employee for a long time. Credible service, I'll go over that briefly. If you work more than 20 hours a week, you get a year of credible service. If your hours fall below 20 hours a week, we prorate your service to a half year of credible service. So we don't have, we try to be fair to the employees, try to be fair to the employers by having a clear line of demarcation. 20 hours per week is that line.
And just to be clear,
Yes.
none of the participants are teachers. The teachers are at the state.
That's correct.
Just for our viewers and.
Absolutely, I should have said that at the outset, and I'm sorry. The teachers in the town of Sherborn belong to the Massachusetts Teachers Retirement System. They do not belong to the Middlesex County Retirement System.
Is that true of the district as well?
Yes.
Yes?
Do you have, do you make that determination on whether they're 20 hours? Or
The
is it-
employer.
The employer makes
The
it.
employer makes that determination. So as of 9/30/13, our third quarter reports, we have close to $1 billion in assets in the retirement system. And I hope that the remainder of 2013 does well, because it's been a good year so far. We get our money from three sources: members' contributions, governmental appropriations, and our return on investments. There's no other source of revenue for us. I wish there were. I wish they could have a casino built and have all the profits from the casino go into the retirement system, but that's not going to happen. We're limited to these sources of income. So from 1993 to 2009, to put this in perspective, of the funds that are existing in the retirement system in Massachusetts right now, 2/3 of them come from employee contributions and return on investments, and 1/3 come from the employers. The Middlesex Retirement System currently is invested with the Pension Reserve Investment Management Trust Fund. That's the state agency that invests the state and state teachers' money. It's a $50 billion plus fund. We determined to go in there in 2006, and in 2007, February 1st, we transferred all of our liquid assets into what they call a PRIT Core Fund. So right now, as of September 30th, almost 94% of our assets are in that fund. A few remaining illiquid assets that were in real estate trusts and private equity could not be liquidated. We still have those, and we're still playing those out through the remainder of this decade. But I think the last one expires in 2017. And we keep cash on hand at State Street Bank for benefit payments, for drawdowns on these for capital calls and things of that nature. This is where PRIT invests its funds, and that's important. They haven't changed this since August of 2011, but they may be changing it. As you can see, it's a well-diversified portfolio. Their private equity fund has just been cited in the Wall Street Journal and the Boston Globe for being the top-performing asset of all public pension funds in the country. So we're very happy about that. That's really boosted up the PRIT return somewhat. There is a balance. PRIT is looking to maybe take more of their investments in-house instead of outsourcing to third parties, may do the investments directly from PRIT. That remains to be seen how that's going to flesh out, but we are very happy with our participation in the PRIT fund. Prior to 2007, the board managed its own assets with the professional consultants and custody banks. And in 2003, some of you may recall that there was a kerfuffle with the currency overlay manager that was actually mismanaging our assets and wound up losing about $38 million. We wound up having to sue our custodian bank, and we were able to recover half of that money. But I think the decision was made, and the right decision was made in 2006 to transfer the management of the assets to the PRIT fund. Any questions on the investment program? Yes, sir.
So it's mostly a PRIT that you talk about bringing it back in-house again? Is that what you're saying?
We could bring the money back in, because when we initially went in, after we made the decision to go in 2007, the legislature enacted a law that said if your investment performance over a 10-year period was less than within 2% of PRIMS, and your funded level was less than 60%, you were going to be mandated to go into PRIT in perpetuity. Those boards that had already made the decision to go in, like Middlesex, were allowed to go in for a 5-year period. So our 5-year period is up. There is no intent on the board right now to come out of PRIT, but PRIT's not immune to any other issues that may involve other pension funds throughout the country, and if in fact there was a blow-up at Prim or allegations of corruption or proven, we'd want to go in there and rescue those funds right away. So I can tell you right now, there is no mind to take over the management of the assets. We feel they're being professionally managed right now, and that Prim's returns historically, until the last few years, have been in the top percentile of all public pension funds in the country. They've had some bumps in the road after 2008, but who hasn't really? But they're back on track right now, and we hope that this will continue for 2007. Do you want to recognize questions from the audience?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Real quickly here.
Yep. Sure.
What's your performance in the last few years?
We're going to get to that in a few more slides.
The actual?
Some very pretty graphs, a lot of colors in it. Very nice.
Tom, I just wanted to ask Tom.
Oh, yes,
I'm sorry. The private equity piece, that's what the state is
Yes.
investing. If they take more of those assets in, do you have any idea what that 10% would change to? If they started managing those other assets?
This is what PRIT manages. This is all of PRIT's money is divided into these asset classes by percentage. So I guess I don't understand your question.
So some of those are out at other investment firms and some that they're running their own investments?
Oh, they're not running any of their own money right now.
Oh, okay.
They have, PRIT essentially oversees, the PRIM board essentially oversees all of the money managers that they hire.
Oh.
They vet and hire money managers through an RFP process. They are thinking of doing more in-house
Okay.
to save some money.
Okay.
So here our asset growth is from going back to 1995. And that's important because, as we'll talk about in a minute, back in 1988, the legislature said to every retirement system, you need to address the unfunded liability. We're passing a law that says every system has to be fully funded in 40 years, which was 2028 at the time. And by 2008, we were halfway there. Believe it or not, we were on an upward trajectory. And then 2008 occurred, and as many of you know, maybe from your own personal investments as well, we lost a significant amount of money at Middlesex. Not as bad as some others did, but it was a hit. And the good news is that as you can see, we're back on track. We're back at pre-2008 levels, and let's hope that direction keeps on going up.
And if you showed where you were at September 30th, you'd be another 100
Correct.
million up. Right?
That's correct. But I don't want to get ahead of myself and
I
jinx
understand.
myself either.
It's a year-end number,
Right.
right? Yes.
Right. So as far as the returns go, this will show you what the investment returns have been on a calendar year basis going back to 1995. Our actuarial target, our assumed rate of investment return was 8.5% up into 1102. We've gradually reduced that discount rate, if you will, or the assumed rate of investment return. As of our last valuation, it was down to 8%, and at the time of the next valuation on 1114, the board will decide whether or not to reduce it even further to 7.75%. The trend is nationwide to reduce that number. Experience shows that we have exceeded 8% long-term on our investment returns, but you never know what's going to happen. As they say, past performance is not a predictor of future returns. So 3 out of the last 4 years, we've exceeded our rate of investment, assumed rate of investment return. Does that answer some of the questions that you have? So if you want to see the investment policy statement of the Middlesex County Retirement System, it's the same as PRIT's. And you can go right on PRIT's website and look at the investment policy statement in some detail. Okay. Now, Town of Sherborn contributions and benefits. I do this when I visit boards of selectmen or warrant committees or finance committees. I break down and show the individual unit what your retirees are actually receiving in benefits and what the Middlesex County retirees in general are receiving in benefits. So, as I mentioned before, prior to 1988, the retirement system was funded on a pay-as-you-go basis. There was no money put aside to address the unfunded liability that was occurring and getting larger and larger and larger. So at that time, the legislature recognized the problem and put the fix in. We're going to fix this problem. We're going to have an additional appropriation every year by the member units to pick up on that unfunded liability. We're going to give you 40 years to pay it off to be 100% funded. At the same time, employee contributions were being increased as well. Massachusetts public employees pay some of the highest contribution rates of public workers in the country. Employee who came in after 196 and who makes over $30,000 a year pays 9% of the first $30,000, an additional 2% over $30,000. If you blend it out, it's about 10.5%. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question from that last slide. When
Yes.
they changed the date, they extended the date to 2040, that was a state determination, or was
That was the state.
you had no option?
Right.
Okay.
The legislature, recognizing that every retirement system took a serious hit in 2008,
Yeah.
every funding
So they spread
schedule.
out the duration to meet that unfunded obligation.
Every funding schedule was had a setback.
Yeah,
So,
understood.
so they extended it to 2040, and hopefully we won't meet another 2028. Now, the Middlesex County retirement system is, as you will see, is
You have a target of an earlier date.
2035.
Right.
We want to leave some wiggle room in the event we need to squeeze this out a little bit more. So the valuation that occurs every, yes, sir?
So on the other slide, though, you said 9%, and then it goes up to 11% if they're a higher paid employee?
It's 2% over $30,000, so it never really makes 11%.
It's 9% on the first 30, and 11% on every dollar above that.
So if
That's
somebody was at 70 or 80,000, that would be no higher than what an individual puts into Social Security then?
Well, Social Security, I think, is 6.2% contribution by an employee. And the employer
No,
matches that at
yeah.
6.2.
Yeah.
So the employees here, I'd say we're putting in more
But
than
it's
they
6
contribute
up
to
to
Social Security.
106,000 or 110,000 a year.
But you have no cap on the 11%.
That's-
Not you, there is no cap on the earnings. If someone's making 200 grand, they're paying 11% all the way up to 200 grand.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. But there is a pension cap on
On what
earnings
the
that
payout
we'll,
is.
that we'll
That's
talk
separate.
about in
Yeah.
a second.
Sidetrack you too much.
That's okay. I enjoy this, I really do. So to come back to the valuation, every 2 years we do a valuation, just a moving snapshot of the condition of the system that's at that particular point in time. And we have Siegel is our actuary, and one of the other documents I passed out was an update that Siegel had just provided us last Friday to the Advisory Council Subcommittee that talks about the valuation. We can spend some time on that, or we can continue on this and come back to that,
Let's go
Mr.
through
Chairman.
this.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's
So the valuation determines a normal cost, the accrued liability, and the unfunded liability, and that's really the big nut on this is the unfunded liability. As I said, in Middlesex County, the valuation determines how much we need to charge every employer to be fully funded in the system by 2035. And every year, a payment is made to reflect the normal cost as well as the remaining unfunded liability. And every 2 years, we revise this. Now, importantly, in Middlesex County, we have the valuation is done for each separate member unit.
Yeah.
The statute calls for an aggregate basis. In other words, you take the payroll from everybody, you divide it all up, and then you proportionally divided the valuation. However, that's really not a fair way of doing it because some towns may pay higher salaries, some towns may hire more workers, some towns may hire more police and fire, which are Group 4 workers who have an enhanced retirement calculation. And then the housing authorities and school districts don't have any Group 4 employees at all. So what we've developed in Middlesex going back several years prior is an individual valuation for each city and town that carves out their own assets and their own liabilities based on their own profile.
And the contribution is based on their own profile as well.
On their own profile
That's great.
in the town.
That's a key question I was going to ask. Yeah.
Just for the benefit of the audience, I believe Norfolk is pooled, correct?
The Norfolk County retirement
Yeah.
system, I believe they use an aggregate method.
Yeah, so the fact that we have a regional, share of a regional entity in Norfolk means we have a liability for the non-teaching staff that is in that, as you said, a non-fair basis, correct?
You have to clarify for me, I don't know what you,
So we
why
have-
you have Norfolk, why would
We
you
have
be
a
in Norfolk?
regional school district.
We're part of the Dover Sherborn Regional School District,
Got it.
so we pay
It
our portion.
it sits in
of their-
Dover,
Sure. I
so
see.
it became Norfolk County.
Well, if you're in Middlesex, if that was sitting in Middlesex, you'd be having an
Better shape.
individual, perhaps. Yes, I'm glad you pointed that out.
Ultimately.
So, we work with our advisory council, we work with our actuary, we work with PARAC to set a funding schedule. And we essentially let the advisory council choose the funding schedule that we adopt. It's the board's legal responsibility to adopt the funding schedule. Sometimes when they do it without input from the communities rightfully in the past would be upset. So since I become chairman in 2004, I make sure that the advisory council is involved in every decision regarding the appropriation. Some have characterized it as choosing their own poison, but nevertheless, we let them have input into the decision that is made regarding the funding schedule.
Is that a constant schedule over time? Are you paying us the same percentage every year, or is it accelerated?
There'll be a new valuation every 2 years, but that'll establish a funding schedule that'll go forward to 2035. And you can see after 2035, payments for the unfunded liability, which we'll show in a second, will disappear. You'll just be paying the normal cost for your employees' retirement.
Do you amortize it sort of straight line basis, or is there some other basis?
No, there's a percentage basis that goes up every year. So our funding schedule has to be approved by the state. The PARAC has to approve it, and they have. And as I said, in 22 years, hopefully, we're going to be paid off, and there'll be no more retirement liability. I hope to be around to see that. I'm not sure it's going to happen, but I will. So some of the new issues in 2012, actuarial assumptions were changed. We had to apply a new mortality table because our retirees and American population in general are living longer. So there's a new mortality table applied. We did reduce the investment return assumption, which also has a tendency to pump up the appropriation. The salary increase assumptions were not changed. That's something we're going to look at for the 2004 valuation, because we think the historical experience has shown that the increase assumptions may be on the generous side. 4% for Group 1 and 5.25% for
Yeah, I
Group
was
4
gonna say,
employees.
we're kicking off at 1% or whatever on general
Right.
and police and so forth.
Yeah.
How does that cut, though? I mean, is it better to have the higher assumption, or is it better to have the lower assumption? Because you get it at both ends, right? You get it at the contribution, and you get it at the payout
Well,
at the other end.
if the mortality table is being increased, and if you're decreasing your assumed rate of return, those two factors will serve to increase your appropriation. If you lower the assumption on salaries, however, that would mitigate somewhat what that increase would be.
Even though the employees will be paying less over time with the lower salary assumption.
No.
But these are projections of what the liability, unfunded liability is, and when it will get paid off, is what they're basing that on.
Right,
So
so,
it's not how it's paid out.
So it's not being paid
It-
in any
it's-
part by the employees, is what you're saying?
This is the portion where they come to the town and say, in fiscal 14, we had to contribute $672,000, which was a 14% increase over the prior year. I think for 15, we're looking at a 7 or 8% increase.
So I guess my
based on
question
their
is, on
numbers.
the actuarial basis, the employees' contributions on an annual basis are not factored into what the municipality enacted?
we look at the money coming in from the investments, we look at the money coming in from the.
But you only look at it for
employees.
present year, you're not projecting it out?
Well, it's tough, we assume, we have assumptions that our investment's going to return
I'm
X
talking
amount of
about,
money.
I'm talking about the salary payments.
Well, the assumption is that salary is going to go up 4% a year for Group 1 employees.
So over the next 40 years, you
Right.
project what the
Right,
number is. So
those are the
once-
assumptions.
Right, so what I'm saying is if you have a lower number, you're gonna project less employee contributions.
If the employees are making less money, then their contributions that are a percentage of their salary will be less.
Which cuts against the town in terms of the town's contribution. So that's why I was wondering.
I see what you're saying, but they're also projecting less payout
Less
to the
payout
employees
at the
because they're
end.
making less money.
Right, so that's what, I didn't know how
But
that.
I don't know what the ratio is.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah,
That's
that's
exactly
good.
what
I
you
get you.
That's why actuaries
Good
get paid
question.
on.
Yeah, it's Buddha's one, actually.
So for the, as I mentioned earlier, for the 2014 actual evaluation, we will be looking to reduce it. Again, we haven't made that decision yet. In 2012, our investment return exceeded the assumed rate of investment return. As of 9/30, our 2013 net return was 8.97%. That's good news. I hope that keeps on going on. And the market value of assets, as the Chairman Peter pointed out, as of 9/30 is $974 million.
You said net a couple times. What is the cost? What's the administrative cost as a percentage of assets?
PRIMS charges about 50 to 54 basis points for managing our assets.
Yeah, and then what about in terms of your staffing and expenses?
Oh, we have salary and expenses, administrative expenses that,
What's that add up to?
that's about
But
two.
net
It's
is
on this
net of
spreadsheet.
the assumed, it takes in the smoothing.
Yes, we smooth assets and yes, there's a smoothing process involved as well.
Okay.
So you're not on a roller coaster ride. Every time the stock market goes up, it goes down, your assessments aren't being, so we defer losses and we defer gains over a 5-year smoothing
So you just
period.
explained that net is not net of fees, that's a different kind of net.
That's right, that's right. I'm sorry if I misrepresented, I should take that off. Okay, so Town of Sherborn, fiscal year 2014, your normal cost is $190,000, which is 5.46% of payroll. The unfunded liability that you're paying off, the total unfunded liability for the town going forward to 2035 is $8 million. You're paying off $480,000 of that in fiscal year 14 as part of your appropriation. So your total appropriation is $670,000. The unfunded liability is $480,000, and the normal cost is $190,000.
Yeah, so just two things if I could. So if you just use that 670,000, one of the earlier slides you showed the population of Sherborn that this relates to, which was, I don't know, 117 active employees or
Mhm.
retirees.
Mm-hmm.
And so you do the math, that's $5,700 for those individuals that this 670 grand represents. So that, I don't know if that's a big number or a small number. It was just a number that I was interested in, okay? So, and I was surprised at the small number of people that all related to.
Right.
I'm making no editorial comment, I'm just my reaction. But the other thing I could use some help on is our unfunded liability. We were surprised, or at least I was surprised, because it's been kicking around $4.5 million the last couple of valuations. And then the most recent one, it jumped up to this $8.3 million. And surprised the hell out of me. Yeah, I know 2008 was a scary year, and yes, you changed your assumption. I guess that's where your earnings assumptions change and your longevity assumptions change, made that such a much larger number.
That's certainly-
I'm just talking it out loud.
That's certainly a part of it, Peter, but I think the town also had a few disability retirements. So we had early retirements. People went out early at a higher rate than they would ordinarily go out at if they had continued working for the normal duration to
Yes.
normal retirement age.
Yeah.
The law does allow for accidental disability retirement for work-related injuries.
Right.
The town, I think, in the past several years, if my recollection is accurate, had at least 2 or not 3 accidental disability retirees, and in a small member unit like this,
That makes a big difference.
that makes a difference.
Yeah. Thank you.
So if you want to look at this.
If you do look at the past reports, that the schedules you produce,
Mhm.
you see our liability for retired employees escalate dramatically. So it sounds like if we don't have additional adverse situations like that, that was an unusual situation, and that's what drove the retired liability piece up so quickly.
That can, in a snapshot taken on 1/1/12, if you had 2 disability retirees go out early at a higher rate of pay without having made the contributions that an employee would have made who stayed in for a whole career, that is going to have, that's going to be reflected more so in this town's appropriation.
Because that shows up if you compare it to 2010 and 2008.
That's correct. That's correct. So let's hope that, we have a very good disability program in Middlesex. Our disability numbers overall are very manageable. We thoroughly vet all our accidental disability retirement applications. We even hire an outside investigator to review and to talk to the employer, talk to the town manager, talk to the employer, visit the person at his home. We don't want to be embarrassed with a front page story in the Boston newspaper of a bodybuilder, let's say, looking for disability retirement. That's not going to happen in Middlesex.
Let me just say a word, though, about those accidental disability retirements. For our town here, we had current operating expenses via 111F, which is an obligation to continue to pay employees as if they were still actively working while they were disabled. And so we had immediate budgetary impacts in every appropriation because we had to appropriate funds to cover those costs. And so the decision was made to support the disability retirement, even though the costs show up here,
Right.
the costs were already in our system and were greater because the amount that had to be paid on a current basis was more than the pension liability.
And not only greater, but more immediate, because you had to pay overtime rates for people to cover the positions that were absent because of disability.
Right, so when they went out, we were able to, when we got them retired, we were able to hire active working people who could cover the shifts.
Sure. And then you're paying two health insurance now, for the retiree and for the new employee. So you can save some money in your operating budget for that particular year, and you can defer some of these costs, but they're going to be in there somewhere, as you pointed out.
Pay me now, pay me later.
So if you want to see the whole valuation, it's on our website, and there's the link.
That's
in
great,
Middlesex.
yes.
Question here.
Yes.
If you're trying to eliminate your unfunded liability by 2035, now what does that mean for each town? Do you say, okay, if we're going to retire the whole thing by 2035, you, Sherborn, have to come up with so much extra dollars to contribute to that, to the takedown of that unfunded liability? Is that a mandate for the town of Sherborn and every other town in Middlesex?
Yes, that's by statute. It's one of the few charges that are sacrosanct. You really is no debate about it, which makes it difficult when the retirement board sends a bill to the town, and
That's something we can't not pay.
you cannot. There's no debate about it because it's gone through the statutory process of approval, and every town in Middlesex is on the same obligation.
But we were funding, I thought over recent years, we've been doing 100,000 per year.
That's the OPEBs, that's the health benefits. It's
Oh,
not just
health
retirement.
insurance.
And so here you see how, if you look at our assessment on the right column, that shows you over the last several years, what the town has contributed to help make that obligation, that unfunded liability, as it was determined, go away over the time period that you were subject to, or we were subject to.
Now, if the town does have some extra cash laying around, they can always send it to the Middlesex Retirement Board. And one of the benefits of having that individual valuation done, that money would be used to Sherborn's credit and Sherborn's credit alone.
Yeah.
Today, we received $700,000 from a water district as payment towards their unfunded liability, because they're doing, they're planning now for the future. And I don't know if there were extra water charges, or people were using more water or whatever, but they had more revenue, and they decided to devote some of it towards this unfunded liability. They already have some money in an OPEB fund too, as well.
What makes those numbers fluctuate? For example, the normal cost, it went up to 219, now it jumped down, now it goes back up. And similarly, the unfunded liability, there's a big increase some years, there's a small increase some years. How does that change?
Well, I don't see any, mostly big.
It's 13 to 14 is 77, and 14 to 15 is on 35.
The valuation, the appropriation is based on the valuation that's done every 2 years. So we look at your individual profile every 2 years, look at the unfunded liability, look at what your employment history is, how much you're paying your employees, who's retired, who hasn't retired, and we establish the normal cost and then establish the unfunded liability. So This is just go back a number of years, but every 2 years, so we had a 2008 valuation that set the contribution for 2010 and 2011. We had a 2012 valuation that set the contribution rates for 2014 and 2015. The one in 2014 will set the contribution rates for the next 2 years. Right. Right. So
Appreciate your patience in taking all these questions, because we're eager learners
it's
here,
important.
you know,
It's
so-
very important, and as I said, Mr. Chairman, I'm willing to come back if my time is running. You just give me the high sign. So who gets all this money, and how much do they get? Which is always a very important question. So on the left-hand side, you see all the types of benefits that the law provides for retirees. Superannuation is your normal retirement based on your age, length of service, and your high 3 years of salary. Ordinary disability applies to people who have 10 years of service and are under age 55 and become disabled because of a non-job-related condition or illness. They are allowed, if they're permanently disabled, they can retire as if they are age 55, based on their actual years of service. Veterans who become ordinarily disabled can retire 50% of their last 12 months of compensation. Accidental disability, that's the highest median allowance, as you can see here. Those are the job injuries that result in the end of a public service career for an employee, and they're the most expensive ones. Termination allowance, pension reform eliminated termination allowances, but we still have 22 folks who lost their jobs through no fault of their own other than a change of administration, a phasing out of their department, a change of duties. Their job was just eliminated. If they had 20 years of service, they were entitled to get a slightly enhanced retirement allowance. Those have been abolished by the legislature. Accidental death, those are folks who retired for accidental disability and then died from the same injuries for which they were retired, and a benefit is being paid to the surviving spouse. Option C, to retire survivor, those are folks 12 and 12, of the 3 12s are all employees who died before retiring. In other words, not every public employee gets to retire and choose their retirement. Some actually die while active members in service, and those are benefits that are paid to children, dependents, spouses, etc. Section 101, before 1997, a disabled employee could not choose an option to pay a benefit to a spouse or her spouse if that individual died for a reason not related to their disability. The law then set a separate benefit for those individuals, a minimum benefit, $500 a month right now. And accidental death, those are killed in the line of duties, public safety folks only, police and fire who actually die from injuries sustained at the scene of a fire or while pursuing a criminal or whatever. That's a separate benefit under the statute. That's 100% of their pay, goes to their spouse for the rest of the spouse's life. Sure.
So of the pool of participants that are being paid, the average annual retirement benefit is $16,550.
That's the median benefit. The average is probably a little bit higher.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
But that is the median benefit of all of our members of our retirement system.
Oh, got it.
And that's spouse as well as.
And spouses of deceased public employees. Now, this is what we pay to Sherborn's retirees. We have 33 receiving the normal retirement. Their median allowance is $15,000. We have 3 disability retirees. I think all 3 of them are just recent disability retirees. Their median allowance is $29,000. One accidental death, someone who retired years ago and died from their injuries. That spouse is getting $16,000 annually. The option C survivor benefit, as Michael mentioned earlier, that's a benefit $4,000 median allowance, $4,000. So total for Sherborn is $15,278. Total median allowance to be paid to retirees and beneficiaries in the town of Sherborn. Of those superannuation retirees, those 33, this is a further dig down into what they are receiving. We've broken the brackets of 10,000, as you can see. There are some high earners in the Middlesex County retirement system for pensions. We have 26 who get over $90,000 a year. Those are all highly compensated individuals, mostly fire chiefs, police chiefs, and no offense, David, but town managers and town administrators.
They're worth every penny, though.
And so, two-thirds of the superannuation retirees make less than $20,000 a year. I think those numbers are important for the town to be aware of. That's where your money goes every year. So these
That
are
would be the normal cost piece?
I mean,
When we're funding the normal cost, that relates more to that than the
Well,
oversimplifying.
normal-
The answer is not really.
not really.
Okay,
Never mind. Never mind.
When
I'll
it says
figure it out.
retirees, these are people who their last job was with the town of Sherborn. If
Correct.
somebody moves from town to town,
That's a good question. If someone worked in in Marlborough, for example, which has a separate retirement system, and they worked 15 years in Marlborough and 15 years in Sherborn, and they retire from this town, we can charge back 50% of that pay to Marlborough. And they have to pay us, and likewise, if someone retired from Marlborough who worked in Sherborn, they can bill us back some of that money. So it's a wash every single year. We're paying out money and we're taking in money. However, if all of the service was rendered in member units in the Middlesex County retirement system, in other words, from Hudson to Sherborn to other towns, Hopkinton and Holliston down here, there is no chargeback between those communities because they're all part of the same retirement system. It's somewhat of a
so we want to
flaw in the
get
law.
our almost retired employees jobs in Holliston.
Yeah, you can do that, because then they'd be responsible for the health insurance. But under,
That's right.
but under 32B,
Yeah.
they can charge, 32B, section 9A and 1/2, they can charge back a portion of the employer's contribution of health insurance to the town. I'm not sure that's being widely adopted or adapted,
I didn't know.
but,
But then we should only hire people from Marlboro.
well,
That's the moral of that
you
story.
have to be careful because unfortunately, the employer's hiring policies are very important. Another town in Middlesex hired a police chief who had retired from a town out of state. He was already receiving a pension from another community in New Hampshire based on prior service. But it was young, and the town was looking to save a few dollars by hiring this individual to work maybe 4 or 5 years as a chief in the town. Unfortunately, during the employment, chief had a heart condition, had disabled him. And under the retirement law, the heart presumption law, it was presumed that that was suffered in the line of duty, and that individual has just been approved for disability retirement. So the town thought they were saving money by hiring someone who already had a pension, already had health insurance benefits from the town, from New Hampshire, but now it's going to cost them a lot of money because of that. So be careful who you hire, I guess. Okay. So this is another slide I like to show because it shows that if a Group 1 member, that's non-public safety, non-police and fire, if a young person came to work for the town after July 1st, 1996, and was a long-term employee, 25, 30 years, and then retired for superannuation, and if the board met its investment assumption returns, then that employee is paying most, if not all, of their own benefit. These are important slides to get there. And we have a couple of examples. So job group 1, 25, you hire $30,000 a year. The pay goes up 4% a year. It's an assumption that we put in there. And the contributions accumulate 8% per year. If they retire at 55, as you can see the benefit, what the benefit would be, what the present value of the benefit is, and what the accumulated value of the employees' contributions would be. And these slides come right from PELRAC, our state agency. I didn't do any great math, and there's a reason with the law school, I'm not really good at math, so. These come right from PELRAC. And as you can see, as the assumptions change, in example 2, if there was a 5% increase per year, and all the other assumptions were met, then at age 60, the employee would not have paid enough money, but at 55 and 65, they would have paid for their own
Those are
retirement
present value
benefit.
numbers on the accumulated contributions as well.
Those are what numbers?
Present value numbers also?
Yes.
Compare and opposite.
Right. So, and again, if they come in later in their life, at age 35, and if they're making more money when you hire them, $50,000 a year, again, They would not be paying for their entire benefit. So there's a lot of moving targets here when you hire someone to come into work with their ages, what you're paying them, how many years they're going to contribute to the retirement system.
And if we had all of the very first example,
Yes.
we'd be paying, the town would have no obligation.
Once you
Retirement
get rid of that unfunded liability for all those employees who are paying 5%,
past, yes.
5% and 7% a year.
We'd have the legal bills for hiring discrimination, but we wouldn't have.
That's correct.
That's right.
Keep the lawyers there. So right now, how much does the employee, I saw how much the employee, but the town pays as well, right? They make a contribution, or is it all employee funded?
Oh, no, the employer makes a contribution. They pay the normal cost of a certain percent of payroll. I think it's 5.64% of payroll is the normal cost, and they pay for the unfunded liability.
And what's the town pay? What percentage does the town pay?
The percentage?
I mean, if they're making, if they're making $30,000 and they're paying 11%, or they're
That's
paying.
these numbers. That's the normal cost number that we have to pay, and then this is the unfunded liability portion.
I get the unfunded liability. I'm talking about right now. If you hire somebody and they make $1,000, X% of that is coming out of their check. They're paying into the system, right?
Correct.
And the town is paying a percentage.
That's correct. Town's percentage is 5.64% of the payroll.
Okay.
Now, the unfunded liability, however, is a moving target.
So, and so why is the unfunded liability so high? Is it because of lack of funding by the employees in early years of the system?
Historically, the employers have not made contributions, much like the health insurance situation today. Now you're putting aside, I think I heard $100,000 a year towards the unfunded liability for OPEB. Yeah, for OPEB. But for years, towns were not required to pay for the unfunded liability, just for the normal costs. And that's what caused this huge situation to occur.
So, just circle back on that. So the asset, I mean, the liability for the town is $8.3 million. The assets are a good bit less than that, right? The actuarial value of the assets.
Right.
So we're less than
8.3
50% funded.
Yes, we're less than 43% funded.
That sounds low. How does that fit? And that's primarily because of early years, it was pay-go, there was unfunded liability building up, nobody recognized.
That's primarily the reason. Also, the board's ability to invest assets were limited to the legal list. We could not go into railroad stocks and banknotes were the only things the board could invest in. In some communities, in some retirement systems, I'm also on the Belmont Retirement Board. When the board exceeded its assumed rate of return, the town took the excess money and put it towards general operating revenues. So instead of leaving it in the retirement system, the town was actually using that money. So that's how this situation has developed over the years.
Okay, final question, just
Yes.
to make sure I understand this. So that 30 or 60, 57% unfunded part is, you've amortized that at the actuarial assumption rate for 22 years, or however many years it takes to get to 2035.
Correct.
Okay.
And we'll be taking another picture of this
So
next year.
if you can continue to get a smooth rate of return at the assumption rate, then that ought to go away. But if you don't achieve that assumption rate, then it's going to continue.
Right, which is why we left 5 years in the funding schedule in case we have a bump in the road, in case we want to avoid unforeseen increases to our member units.
So the next potential shock that we might see is when you meet in January and say we're gonna lower that assumption rate to 7 3/4. You got two things that are going to work against you, and one thing that might work for you in terms of lowering the salary
Assumptions.
Okay.
Right.
And when will the town see the results of that?
Well, the evaluation for 1/1/14 will start probably in the spring of 2014 and be completed by the end of the summer of 2014.
Where does Sherborn stand at 43% funded in the big picture in this town?
We're in the lower spectrum of all public funds in Middlesex County. And there's a number of reasons for that. Historically, I can just touch upon a couple of them. At one point in time, all personnel of the courts, probation officers, secretaries, clerks were in the Middlesex County retirement system. Court reform back in 1978 transferred all of those employees to the Commonwealth. So all of the assets they contributed to the retirement system went to the state retirement system. But we maintained some liability for those retirees. In 1997, Middlesex County was abolished. Middlesex County was our largest member unit, with more employees than any other member unit. The remaining employees, registry of deeds, the jail personnel, the maintenance workers, the library, law library employees, they were all transferred over to the state retirement system at the time. So another $20 million in assets left our system and went to the state retirement system. But however, we have no, and we still have retirees from Middlesex County we're paying, but we have no governmental unit to hit with an appropriation because Middlesex County is gone. So the liability for Middlesex County, believe it or not, is also all wrapped up in the appropriations that we charge here. We are right now discussing with the state. There seems to be a payment that the state was supposed to have made to Middlesex County when they abolished Middlesex County that somehow got lost. So we've renewed our negotiations with the state to get back some of the money to recoup some of the liability for the county employees. Because it's unfair that, you know, they abolished the county tax. Remember, Mr. Hogan paid a county tax for many, many years here, and that county tax disappeared. Well, that county tax was supposed to be used to pay for the liability for the Middlesex County retirees. In the Middlesex County Hospital, you recall, we had a big facility that was also closed in 1996. So there's some liability hanging out, which is, I think, contributes to that funded level at 43%. But that's one goal we want to go after, is we raise that funded level.
So some portion of our 672 is to help cover those Middlesex County leftover liabilities.
It's not, it's built into it somehow, but I don't want you to get the impression that you're paying somebody else's bill, because the reason we changed for that whole appropriation method was to make the towns bear the responsibility. If they want to hire people, they want to pay people, they're going to pay the pension liability for that people. So it is built in somehow into the overall scheme. Because we're no longer getting contributions to Middlesex County to pay their retirees.
Yeah.
Now, the state does make some payments to us for cost of living increases that were granted prior to the change in the law, 1997. But that's a very small amount of money coming in right now.
So that 43 number is town specific?
I'm sorry?
That 43 number is specific to Sherborn, or that's the?
Yes, I'm saying it's specific to Sherborn.
What's the average?
Average funded level of, that's a good question. PARAC does have a number of everybody's posted, everybody's funded level is posted on PARAC's website. Some towns Wellesley used to be 100% funded because they put money aside every single year, but no longer are they 100% funded. Some of the newer systems, the Mass Water Resources Authority, for example, that was created in 1984, they are about 80% funded. Cambridge is about 80% funded because they put money into their system. But most communities are in that 60% funded level.
And we're at 43.
Middlesex County's at 43.
That's Sherborn.
That's Sherborn, right.
So,
But the
but if we
43
got
is Middlesex County as a whole, not specific to Sherborn.
But he's saying it is because Sherborn's part of the Middlesex retirement system.
Right.
But if we increased our percentage, that wouldn't necessarily raise it up. The Middlesex County doesn't increase.
The goal is to be 100% funded
Yeah,
by 2035. That's why you're making these extra payments into the retirement system, to get rid of that unfunded liability.
But if we made an additional $1 million, that would affect Sherborn's unfunded liability.
That would, it would stick.
Positively,
It would get,
and it wouldn't be spread around to everybody else.
that's correct. It would stay with Sherborn. And that's what we tell the advisory council. If they want to do that, it may make sense to do that at some point. I mean, it depends on the town's fiscal health. And right now, these are not good times, as we know.
Tom?
Yes, sir.
The assumed reinvestment rate, how is that rate determined? Is that PRIT or the board or actuarial?
Which, the assumed rate of return?
Yes, 8%.
PARAC has some role in setting the assumed rate of return, and it's essentially, historically, 8% has been the assumed rate of return for public pension funds throughout the state and throughout the country, excuse me. But the movement now is downward. There are some who would have you with a discount rate of 3% or 4%. Some think that 8% may be too low, that we're going to do well just look at the good times we had at the beginning of the decade, and the money's going to be generated. We think we're taking a reasonable approach in slowly reducing the assumed rate of return, so as not to create a ripple effect that would see assessments go up at a rate higher than they should go.
So if you say we are taking a conservative approach, who are you talking about? Are you talking about PRIT, or are you
I'm talking about, well, PRIT's assumed rate of return, their asset allocation is designed to return 8%. That's why part of the reason why we are at 8% as well, because the asset allocation, the risk profile, and where the money is invested is designed long-term to, according to their experts, to return 8%.
But you could take a lower percentage, but not a higher percentage?
We could reduce it to 7.75, even though we would be bound by principle. We can't make PRIT change their asset allocation to reflect the 7.75 assumed rate of return. But we may, PRIT for years was at 8.5, and now they've come down to 8. So they were at 8.5 and we were 8.25. So it has happened historically in the past.
All right, great, Tom. I think I'll let you cruise on through
I'll
here.
cruise.
Because we may have
Right.
other questions that we can follow up
Sure.
through David or whatever, and then we'll, maybe return visit.
Well, I don't want to overstay my welcome here.
No, you're not doing that. We don't want to.
I just want to touch on pension reform,
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman,
that'd be
again for a
great.
couple of minutes to show you what the legislature has done over the last 3 years to sort of tighten the system, get rid of some of the pension abuses that have raised everybody's hackles.
Yeah.
So essentially, there are 3 years of pension reform. Chapter 21 of the Act of 2009 was the first one in which the legislature was accused of going after the low-hanging fruit. All of the abuses that were written about in the Boston Globe, they went after mostly elected officials, and eliminated termination allowance of elected officials. The law actually said if you were an elected official for 6 years and you failed the re-election, you could collect a pension. So the law, that was changed. Elected officials used to get 1 day of, for 1 day of service, we get a full year of credible service. So if your term ended on January 4th, you would get that whole full year added to your retirement calculations. So it made some changes. And changed the definition of compensation. Not every payment that an employer makes to an employee goes into their retirement calculations. And the law tightened up what those payments are going to be. The next, Chapter 131 of the Act of 2010, this is important because I don't think this is well understood. This bill actually capped pension earnings at 64% of the federal limitation. So the federal limitation on compensation that can be used for pensions was $255,000. That's a sliding scale. It goes up every single year. So that would result in a regular compensation limit for persons who became members after January 1st, 2011, because it cannot be retroactive, only prospective. $263,200. That would be the maximum compensation they could receive. And so the maximum pension they could receive would be 80% of that amount of money. So there is a pension cap in place right now in Massachusetts. So the days of people getting,
So Billy Bulger slipped in before this. Would that be a fair
well,
statement?
he and a lot of other people, because it only applies to people who came into the system after 1/1/11. So we won't see this be applicable for many, many years, but it is there right now.
But is the federal limit there for people that have been in the system? Or not?
Yes, there is a federal limit, a different federal limit for people who are in the system. Many of the doctors at UMass
Yeah.
Medical
Yeah.
have contributed to a separate benefit program
Oh,
to complement their state pension fund.
Gotcha.
So these are just some of the other changes. I'm going to, I talked about some of these before. This is in the PowerPoint. Chapter 188 of the Act of 2010, this is what extended the funding schedule, allowed increases in the cost of living increase. So the base cost of living increase for many years was $12,000. 3% of $12,000 was the maximum cost of living increase you could grant to a retiree. We've slowly inched up on that with the approval of our government's local option. Our legislative body, which is the Advisory Council, approved it to $13,000 2 years ago and $14,000 now. The board has adopted a policy that says we won't revisit raising the base for the cost of living increase unless we have 3 years, consecutive years of investment returns that exceed our assumed rate of return. So we put some policy in place there, and even then, depending on what our liability is, we may not raise it again, but that's where it is right now. This was the governance law. This substantially changed a lot of the retirement laws that attend to the benefit calculations. It increased the retirement age. It decreased the factors, the age factors to be used in the retirement age. Instead of having your high 3-year average compensation, it's a high 5-year average compensation. So I'm going to go slide through these changes of perspective. Only people coming in after 4/2/12 will be impacted by this. So the changes that we'll see, the savings, will be long-term down the road. We won't see any immediate savings, unfortunately, in your appropriations. So these are just some examples of how these benefit changes will impact and reduce the benefits being paid to public employees. This would result that the 5-year averaging would result in a 3.8% cost reduction under that set of circumstances. The increasing the normal age factors, as you can see, prior to Chapter 176 and before 176, at the age, what the age factor percentage and formula was, that's been reduced. These will get a little bit dense. I'm going to get through these things if I can. I'll get to the summary. Increase the retirement age. This is the adjusted amount of their pension benefit. So this is the final. So you put all these changes in place. The benefits are going to be reduced anywhere from 0 to 10%. The ages will be increased, and the overall will be a 4 to 5% cost reduction on an actuarial basis for pensions going forward. So at least the Massachusetts legislature, unlike others in the country, recognized the problem, have taken steps to address reforms in the pension law. Okay. This is the summary page right here. Those 3 factors that I just sped through quickly: combined impact, cost reduction, 11 to 14% long term. Regular compensation, you talk about Senator Bulger. He was pretty much the prime mover for changing the definition of what regular compensation will be. Wages, base salary, or other base compensation. This includes longevity, shift differentials, hazmat training for police and fire. It excludes, however, payments for hours worked beyond your normal work week, bonuses, severance pay. All these other payments have been kicked out. The last bullet point there, housing was the Bulger issue. That's gone. Lodging, travel, clothing allowances are gone as regular compensation. So they've reined in a little bit what the payments are they're going to use to calculate someone's pensions. Anti-spiking, 2 provisions of anti-spiking, meaning you can't essentially load up your last years of employment to artificially enhance your retirement allowance. There's no indication that was going on in Massachusetts. It was going on elsewhere throughout the country, not so much here in Massachusetts, but the legislature put it in anyway as a preventive measure, so it won't happen going forward. So you can't add on artificially to your salary at the end of the year. 2 provisions. Any 100% increase in 2 consecutive years will result in a 5-year look-back period for calculations. Now, who gets 100% increase in their pay? I can tell you who. A town councilor or selectman who decides to take the town manager's job, and all of a sudden is being compensated at $7,500 a year, and now is getting compensated at $90,000 a year. That's a 100% increase in compensation, believe it or not. So we do have some folks that this does apply to. The other one's a little more difficult, and you really need to be calculated for this because it says that the regular compensation cannot exceed the average of the 2 preceding years' regular comp by more than 10%. So what does that mean? Well, my math friends tell me that means a 6.6% raise in 2 years will be a 10% raise, in fact. So this is to prevent people from getting little stipends and things at the end of their career that artificially inflate their salary. There are some exceptions. Collectively bargained agreements, of course, will be exempt from this. If you want to look at more regular comp, it's all in there. Social Security, we talked about that. There's basically, if you're eligible for Social Security and your public pension in Massachusetts, you may not be able to collect both of them in full. The Social Security will reduce a benefit that's payable to you or your spouse because you are receiving a Massachusetts public pension. It only impacts maybe 9 states, 12 states, who are not Social Security states in this country, which is why they cannot get any traction in Congress to fix this, because it really does hurt a lot of individuals, mostly spouses who have stayed home with children to raise families and enter the workforce later in life. They seem to be impacted more so than others. So this is all in there as well, so I think I'm pretty much at the end of my presentation, Mr. Chairman, on this.
Well, that was terrific. I learned a lot. And do we have access to this? Like, could we put that up on our website?
You certainly can. David has a copy of this, and
if we chose to, just because I'm sure there's a whole bunch of people who love to study this, frankly.
yeah, the board's personal view is, I mean, there are critics of the retirement system, there are supporters of the retirement system, and there's a healthy debate that can go on about the defined benefit program. But we like to see the debate based on facts, and we think this contributes a lot to having the facts out there. You can take a position about pensions and not pensions, but you really should have all the facts before you take that position. So, and David and I have a very good relationship, and every time David picks up the phone or sends me an email, he always gets a response right away.
Yeah, I do.
That's great.
Did you get involved with House Bill 59?
No, actually we don't. We put something in our recent newsletter about it, only to tell our members and beneficiaries about the bill. That does not come within the purview of the Middlesex Retirement Board or any retirement board. It's really a health insurance issue. There was a hearing on October 31st at the State House, Joint Committee on Public Service. I'm not sure what's going to come out of that. The Middlesex County retirement system, our only job regarding health insurance is to take the required contribution from the retirement allowance and pay it back to the town as their share of the employee's health premium.
Great.
Well, the proposal there to change the period for 10 years to 20 years, 55 to 60, and all those
For health insurance coverage.
health insurance
Yeah.
coverage will have, should have some impact on
You may have individuals who qualify for a pension and would not qualify for health insurance. I think that's what they're trying to correct within the committee right now, to make it more amenable to those who may have 17 or 18 years of service and would not qualify for health insurance when they retire under the new provisions in House 59. So we're keeping an eye on it, but it really doesn't have any direct impact on the Middlesex retirement system.
And just for the record, I need to disclose that I am outside counsel to PRIM, and I don't think anything here involved that agency.
I'm glad I spoke highly of Prim then.
Well, there you go. Any other questions for Mr. Gibson?
I just want to say you're very good at explaining this, and I appreciate you coming into town for us.
Thank you very much. I could be better. As I said, math's not my strong suit. But any information you want, we can get it to you, and we can have our actuary come out as well, Kathy Riley, who knows these numbers inside and out, back and forth.
We made some very complex concepts much more understandable.
Well,
for
thank you
us.
very much. I appreciate it. And as I said, and if David needs any more information, just pick up the phone, shoot me an email, David, and we'll get it right over to you.
That's great.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Yep, appreciate it. Really do. I think we're gonna take a 5-minute break, David.
Yes.
We'll take a 5-minute break, if that's all right. Then you're gonna come back. We're gonna listen to Bob Delaney here, and
Okay.
he's definitely come back at 7:30 here.
Should I hang around for Bob?
Oh, you're welcome
I
to,
have some
Bob.
questions for him.
Yeah, absolutely, you know. He can take it as well as he can give it, you know?
So can we run?
Okay, we're back. Thank you for your patience. We had a great session there with Mr. Gibson. And now, next up, we have Bob Delaney. I know Mr. Gibson's a hard act to follow, but Bob, if anybody
Well-
can do it, you can follow him.
Okay, thank you. So good evening and thanks for the time, Mr. Chairman. I'm Bob Delaney and I'm here to brief you and our audience about our public meeting on Monday evening. The title of our program is Sustain Our Sherborn, same initials SOS as our ad hoc committee used to save our Sherborn. And coincidentally, we are in the midst of expanding what SOS stands for. Save, serve, and sustain our Sherborn are our goals. And all three of those will be on display Monday evening at a public meeting. As we present our program of new and updated information, we will review what we all love about Sherborn, with the possible exception of our taxes. But we'll talk about those too. Following the introduction, we will examine our current financial situation and identify some current obstacles to financing our town. Excuse me, I got lost here. Our possible, following the introduction, we will examine our current financial situation and identify some current obstacles to financing the town, including our growing property tax burden and its impact on our current real estate sales. Hopefully, we'll have somebody here from the real estate business to make comments about the impact of taxes on real estate sales. We will consider some options for avoiding these obstacles, including a significant way to slow the rate of growth of tax. We will demonstrate that these issues are not only looming budgetary matters, but will also likely continue to have a significant negative impact on our own taxes. And now that I have the attention of the tax-paying public, I would like to say that we believe that it will be necessary to reconsider some of our priorities in the past, such as conservation land, town forest, Chapter 61, which under state law is assessed at reduced rates, resulting in lower taxes. These are the kinds of issues that we need to address at this point, because if we don't, we're going to find ourselves funded lower than 43% of our liabilities. As you can tell, the main thrust of our program is to educate voters concerning the fiscal challenges facing our town, now as well as in the future. We believe strongly, as the saying goes, that an informed voter will make good choices. We have consulted with state and local sources and believe we are on firm ground with our past analysis and our future projections. We think these issues are critical to sustaining our town, especially our schools. And we don't want to forget about our real estate values too. As an added bonus, we will have at our meeting leading town officials. The chairman of the Board of Selectmen, the advisory committee, the planning board, and board of assessors, who can and will comment and support the issues facing us. I think that's pretty much it. I'd like to thank you and say to everybody that I hope we see you all here on Monday. And I'd like to add just one little postscript. This mailing went out this week to the town, nice bright green, it's from SOS. And one of the things that's emphasized on here is, have you read the Board of Selectmen report done by the chairman? Sherborn Financial Story on the homepage of the town website. It isn't pretty, which is probably an understatement. So I would like to recommend to everybody in town to read this statement by chairman and to come to our meeting Monday night to discuss it, ask questions, and learn something. and hopefully help us get a handle on our obligations.
So it's Monday night, 7:30 in this
Right.
room.
Mhm.
Is it going to be televised, Bob, or taped?
Yep,
Yes, it's going to be,
Is it going to be live?
yep.
oh, it's going to be live, no kidding. Wow.
We did.
And, yeah, I'm looking forward to coming. Am I supposed to do anything?
Well, while you stand on your head,
Just be prepared to dance, eh? Yeah.
He has got himself a target that he wears.
Yeah, I know, I have it.
And so we'll have him,
Yeah,
we'll have him
brings
wear
it-
that for the meeting.
I mean,
I'll
you
bring
know,
my target, how's that?
we'd
Yeah.
like to see everybody.
As far as that presentation on the website, my name's on it, but I really didn't do the work. There was a lot of work put in by our town accountant and David as well, so.
Okay.
Well, let me just comment on that. It's not that the work was not pretty. The work was excellent. It's
story.
some of the conclusions
Yes.
reached that are less than rosy, let's put it that way.
To say the least.
But
Yeah,
it was well done.
thank you.
I wonder if you want to post that in case more than one selectman wants to show up at that meeting on Monday?
Yeah,
Sure.
To discuss, yeah, so you
It's
can
48
just actually
hours.
discuss.
we have emergency capability of some sort. We should maybe exercise that. I think he's right, because you
Yeah.
probably want to show up. and
Yeah.
You may, I don't know what you're doing.
Well,
Paul,
as
Monday.
long as you
I'll show
don't
up
sit next
regardless
to
of
one
whether it's
another and
posted.
discuss
Yeah.
anything, you can.
Yeah, we're not going to deliberate anyway. I will say, Bob, I know that the SOS group continues to meet every week. I just find it astounding. You meet every Friday morning next door here.
Right.
Um,
Are we charging a fee for the use of that room?
Well, that's something
There
we can
go. That
discuss.
solves all of our financial
Yeah.
problems.
We vacuum.
Yeah, yeah, they leave it better than they find it, I think, yeah. But no, and I know that there's been a lot of work. I haven't been to one of your meetings in some time, but I know the group's been putting in a lot of work, taking this seriously, because you are concerned about the future of Sherborn. So I think it's time well spent by anybody either watching or attending.
Well,
And
I
I'm looking
hope-
forward to whatever it is you're going to show
I hope
us.
people will come in, because I'm sure there'll be questions,
Yeah,
and we'll have lots of people here to answer the questions.
right.
Do you think there'll be any questions about the town's relationship with the state?
You want us to see?
What?
You want us to see?
I'm just trying to figure, because I could answer anything about that.
I don't think so.
But you don't know. For
No,
instance,
I
something
mean,
came
but,
up today,
yeah.
comparison, I think you saw something regarding state aid of Sherborn versus the Sudburys of
Which
the
I could
world.
answer, but
Right.
it didn't seem appropriate to answer in an email, but if
Yeah.
I could take a minute, I could do that right now.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
In October, first of all, there's a formula, it's a complicated formula, established long before I got involved with state government. I secured in October an agreement from all of the representatives of the cities and towns to revisit that formula. The joke was, though, why would the most affluent community in the state, which is what Sherborn is now, expect to do better under a new formula than it does under the present formula? And my answer is that I don't think that simply looking at the wealth of a community, that is the per capita income generation of residents of the town, is the right, is given too much emphasis in the formula. That we as a community have real expenses, real needs, and we don't have the commercial tax base to offset it. So in some respects, I am hoping we will do better under that formula. But it's gonna take a year or two before we get there. So in the meantime, the formula does not work towards Sherborn's advantage because of a history of too much per capita income.
But the issue was a comparison to Sudbury, which has almost the exact same income statistic, either per capita or per household, at least according to what I saw, and the discrepancy was very
Sherborn is
great.
far and away the top in the state. It's #1 in the state.
That was the information that we were given. So,
the discrepancy is huge, 50% or 70%, something like that.
We've even pulled ahead of Dover, which is great. I mean, it's a wonderful thing for our community to be.
Hard to believe we're wealthier than Weston.
We're ranked as number 1,
Well,
the wealthiest community in the state. In the criteria that are used in the formula, there are different ways to look at wealth. And we should be proud of the fact that we're a wealthy community. That's a sign of our success. But it has consequences with regard to state aid. It's presumed that if we wanted to, we could really pay for what
That's
we
right.
need. Whereas there are many communities that there simply isn't the resources to pay for things that need to get done, particularly with regard to education. Sherborn is far and away a leader in investing in education, and there are places in the state that truly need state help. And so when they're working on these formulas, they are trying to equalize communities, and that means that those who are capable of paying more are given less, and those who are incapable of contributing more receive more, in sort of a nutshell.
Yeah, I don't know what that
much is
proves.
given, a lot is expected. Doug?
Nothing. I don't know that, I mean, it's philosophical, but I don't know that it answers the question of how do we get more money out of the state. I'd just call on our state rep and our state senator to push harder for us next time.
Well,
And if you're there, Paul, I mean, I know you're trying as hard as you can, but that's
the number goes up
an important number.
every year. We're still 400 million below where we were in 2009. Trying to make that back up. That is statewide.
Statewide, yeah.
But over the last 3 years, it's gone up every year. And we think we have an agreement that it's going to go up again next year.
Well, let's hope so. We contribute probably a lot more than we get. So,
Right. All right, Bob, so Monday
Okay.
night it is, 7:30, be
Okay.
here.
Thank
Excellent,
you.
thank you for letting us know. And thanks for letting me know I better be prepared to have that target.
yes.
Great, okay, so now we're on, David, to the next section here, administrative reports and so forth.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to talk about was the Thanksgiving holiday.
Okay.
It was brought up last time about some towns were closing at 2 o'clock before Thanksgiving and closing the day after Thanksgiving. And right now, we only have one person that'll be in the office on Friday. So what I wanted to recommend was that we just close on Friday and they use personal
Personal
vacation
time,
time on that day.
We
don't
could shut
expect much.
the heat down or turn it down on Wednesday, is that the idea?
I wasn't looking at it as an energy efficiency thing, but there certainly is an energy
There's
efficiency.
nobody here,
Yeah,
might as well turn the
yeah,
heat down.
for 4.5 days that you wouldn't be heating the
Well,
place.
is that something that we even need to vote on or anything? I mean, you can basically make that call, can't you? I support it, I support your recommendation.
Well, just to play it safe, I will move to authorize the town administrator to issue
Perfect.
an appropriate decision
Okay.
with regard to closing of town hall for holiday.
Well, actually, could I add something to that?
Sure.
It's, I don't want to declare Friday a holiday. We're the only office that's open. So it would just be allowing the employees in our office to be taking that day off.
How do you want the motion to read? What I'm trying to do is to empower you as our
Author.
new super
Manage the schedule, you know, on the
administrator
day after
to
Thanksgiving.
have this
Yeah.
power,
Right.
not just for this particular holiday, but
Right.
the
Set
issue
the
will come
holiday
up.
hours for the selectmen's office yeah.
Do you want to take the word holiday out and put in?
Select the hours, yeah, around the holiday. Yeah.
Yeah, around the holiday.
Yeah.
So
That's
Could I
fine.
amend the motion to?
Yeah, I agree with Peter. I'm not sure we need to be in the middle of this, but sure, if you're making a motion to
So-
authorize David, second that.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor? Great.
Okay,
Just
so
to
I'll-
clear up any ambiguity or any
Yeah.
resistance that somebody, or objection that somebody might have as to.
No, they'll just object
To
to
the-
us instead of to David.
That's right.
I don't think you've cleared any of
You're
that.
you're the messenger, we're the bad guys, right, David?
No good deed gets unpunished.
Yeah.
Right.
How's that work, all right?
Yeah,
That's
we'll
good
just,
for
I'll
you.
discuss it with
Yeah.
the staff on that day and see what the
Figure out-
coverage is and
Perfect.
allow them to take that time off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was it Warren again?
Is that your car again, Paul?
Yeah, keep going.
All right, we'll keep going. What else do we have, David? Then we just got, go ahead, I'm listening, I'm all ears.
We're gonna have a planning board in for an update on November 21st at that meeting.
Yeah, that's good. So, so Gino's coming in, is John Higley, did we, oh,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
I think that'll be a great
It'll be,
meeting.
yeah, lots to talk about.
Yeah. Excellent.
And that's it. And then
Okay.
the signing of a special state election.
Okay, so we have a warrant to approve. I did look
Oh,
at it. You-
pass right over.
So I know there's, I don't know where the signature page is in this pile. It may not have come up. But I would move for approval of this warrant and whatever amount it is, and it's warrant number 20. I've reviewed it. It's subject to David's review and approval, and it's also subject to somebody from Recreation. And I don't know if you had any questions, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, you know,
Perhaps.
in recreation is a good call. There were a couple of expenses on there that I questioned, and just wonder if in our, you know, present fiscal straits, we ought to be very careful about some of the things we're spending money on and really critically assessing some of those things. I don't want to feel like William Proxmire, you know, identifying the items that are, you know, that seem silly, but there are some things in there that
Mike
thinking
pointed
they're
out a
not.
couple of good things that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
to Diane and I, that we'll look at tomorrow morning before anything
Yeah.
gets.
And then just more systematically, I think that would be something that would be good to, you know, charge you or Diane with, David, just sort of on an ongoing basis, to look for things like that so we can bring them up and
Right.
see if there are, and you may do that already, but to, you know,
Try.
systematically do it, sure.
Yeah.
And I think that also may segue into our workshop coming up here
Yeah.
briefly, because it's that type of item, I think, that we can talk about. But, so I made a motion to approve it, subject to David's review and approval.
My comment was just a legal comment, and that is, we need to have the signature page.
I think
It
Diane's
actually
going
has
to
to
get
be
it.
signatures.
Yes,
If we don't have that, none of this is any good, so.
right. So I don't know where,
But we can vote on the motion and then hopefully,
and then we'll sign it once she brings it up.
you know, it's like a check, you
So
actually
any,
need to have the
I didn't have a
signature.
second. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Okay, so we'll sign it when she gets here. While we're waiting, we have a signing of the state election warrant. And am I supposed to read this? That would be a good thing for the clerk to read, don't you
Okay,
think?
great. To either of the constables of the town of Sherborn, greeting. In the name of the Commonwealth, you are hereby required to notify and warn the inhabitants of said town who are qualified to vote in the special state election to vote at Sherborn Town Hall, 19 Washington Street, Route 16, on Tuesday, the 10th day of December, 2013, from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. for the following purpose: to cast their votes in the special state election for the candidates for the following office: Representative in Congress, 5th Congressional District. Hereof fail not and make return of this warrant with your doings thereon at the time and place of said voting, given under our hands this 14th day of November, 2013.
Okay, excellent. So
There's something wrong here, this is like 3 inches and that's 2 inches.
this goes together, so it's all part of this package. Okay, and it's warrant 20, and the amount is $567,060.84.
You know, and going back to those comments, I wonder if we should pull a couple of things from this warrant before we approve it, or before the town administrator approves it?
That's your right.
You can, we
I
can
mean,
do that.
Yeah,
But it can
well,
request the whole.
that would be the items we talked about before, David.
Okay.
So that
Subject
would
to-
be.
So you're amending it subject to David's
Subject to
approval?
David's approval,
And pulling those items for.
or at least for further consideration.
Okay. when you say for further consideration, you mean pulling those items and bringing them back under another warrant?
Right, or at least pressing the people who've said they want to pay for those items as to whether,
Right.
whether they need to pay for them. I think actually one of them's a bill. I would say there's probably only one item in there that
Yes.
it can be
Yeah.
pressed at this point.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, okay.
All right, so you want to revote this? I mean, I've already signed it, we've signed it, so.
Yeah.
Just some clarity of direction on this.
Clarity, direction for David to
That's
address that
awesome.
item with the department, which I think is CM&D.
Yeah, Diane has the
For
list
Diane
that
to
we had
address
talked
it.
about.
Well-
Well, no, I'll do it, but she made note of your.
Very good.
Yeah.
Paul, are we doing anything?
Yeah, it was, sorry to be a lawyer.
That's what we need. All
It's
right.
been infected with the lawyer bug for a long time. If you're gonna hold something, you have to write it, and we have to agree to it. If you're not gonna hold it, then you just sign it.
So we're going to hold something until David gets some clarification from the CM&D department?
You have to
You
write
have
it
to write it
on
on
the
there, that's
sheet.
fine.
And you have to refer to the invoice number.
Yeah, okay, that's what we'll do then.
Hmm.
This is going to take time, Peter, we're screwing up your schedule.
No schedule, we're here to do the job.
Why don't
you move
Well,
on to
we
the
can
next
ma-
item while
Well, I just want to, wait, can I have a motion to approve this, this thing you just
So
read,
moved.
the special state election? Okay, I second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I'm going to sign it here. There is a typo in the font. Oh, you speak, good.
This is black ink, can I borrow your?
Absolutely, I'm going to start charging. All funds will go to the town, another revenue item, right?
There you go.
Great.
Okay, so it's, what number am I using here?
But you can do that after the meeting. We can vote to approve it subject to the holding of the items.
Right,
that we
fine.
mentioned.
There you go, all right, so.
I'm not going to sign in red ink today, though.
And you have to sign this too. while you're at it.
Good.
Great. I like that trust, Diane.
Under, can I just make a selectmen's report?
Absolutely.
The town of Sherborn had a Veterans Day celebration on November 11th. It was the latest in a series of Veterans Day events. I think it was the largest attendance that we've achieved so far. We were spilling out of the room. The new features this year included an essay contest for the 5th grade at Pine Hill School, and we had a chorus from the 5th grade from Pine Hill. As I look back from the first time we did it, when there was few of us and all of us were quite senior, and I looked over the crowd for this Veterans Day, I saw tremendous diversity in representing all generations in Sherborn. It was a tremendously successful event. I think we deserve great praise for the group that put it together, for the members of the board, each of whom spoke eloquently at the event. But for the public who did not attend, my message is you missed a really good event, and we hope to see you there next year.
I agree 100% with that. We have to really thank Diane, because it wouldn't, all the logistics, the food, and just things happening, without her, might not have happened. But it was very special. It was one of the things I really enjoy being a selectman, is doing something like that. And there were babies in the room. There was the gentleman, the oldest veteran, 101 years old. He got up and spoke briefly. All three of us were part of it. It was great. I loved it. I loved it.
And it was taped, so you watch the local channel and you'll see the replay.
Excellent. It's taped, and so it'll be on the channel. It was great.
Okay.
Good job. All right. We're going to move along to our workshop then. I think we've got all the rest of the business here, right, David? And you want to just sort of lead in briefly, you and I talk briefly. My sense is what we're looking at is the beginning of a conversation. I don't expect us to get anywhere of completeness other than a general sense of where we ought to go here.
Okay.
Because, and I see you left us a pile of
Well, I'll explain.
information, so.
I'll explain what I was thinking. You know, the budget is the major reflection of policy, and the Board of Selectmen are the chief elected officers in charge of overseeing the townwide direction and policy.
Yep.
So in order for us to make any decisions in the budget, it would be good if we've tied them to the Selectmen's vision or their goals. So I noticed looking back through, going back to 2001, some years there were goals and other years there were not. They took different formats. I found no after reporting. You know, me walking in, I don't know which of these goals were achieved
yeah.
or even successful, so there was no after review. So I provided you with those past goals, so I'd like to go through those at some point, you know, and see what your thoughts are. And then,
By that you mean, since this was here, we haven't had a chance to look through this, so.
well, I'd like you, no, yeah, I'd like you guys to
So,
take
us to
them.
take it, read them, and
Read
then
through.
see what catches our fancy, if you will.
Right, this should
Yeah.
get you thinking about
Perfect.
goals that have been set in the past, and maybe they still
Yeah.
exist. and
Yeah,
you
I think
wanna
that's great.
I'm struck
roll
by one
forward.
thing on this package. There were a couple of years where the goals were set individually by selectmen, or actually attributed to individual selectmen. I would hope we could, as much as possible, get away from that this time and have goals that are a consensus view of the board, or at least a view that is discussed and not attributed to any particular
Right,
individuals.
right. And in the past, you know, smaller towns, the selectmen did a lot of day-to-day hauling of things. And
Yep.
and it's how they survived. And if we, yeah, I noticed that was in 1 year.
Couple
Couple
years in
years,
there,
I see.
yeah.
Oh, really?
And that may have had more to do with the state of the board in terms
Let me-
of
let me,
different perspectives or something like that.
Let me correct the record on that. All of these that have listed a selectman's name after it were not individual goals. Those indicate the source of the goal, but the Board of Selectmen voted on each of these goals. And there were additional goals that were not supported by the board as a whole that came from individual members. This was just to keep track of who was the.
Who brought it to the table?
Who brought it to the table.
Okay.
That's
Okay,
all that was.
understood.
Yeah, I don't know if we need a scorecard this time.
Okay. So if you go through some of these documents, I found one town administrator report from 2011. And then that brings us to 2012 with that Jim Purcell document.
Yeah.
We've added some comments, or added, there's a comment column there. So we've tried to answer some of those, and we'll update the status and reissue that spreadsheet.
Yep.
So you're suggesting we start with this as the goals or the,
Well, that's the most recent set of goals, but that was, I guess, put together after the Collins report and the DOR report. So, and I have a whole stack of, you know, other things that have come up, and I've tried to catalog those to see if they can be set under some bigger picture goals for the town.
And that's
So-
kind of your last page.
Right,
isn't
so
it?
that's the
Yeah.
last page. So I figured, well, let's start at the end of where we would want to be next year,
Yeah.
which we would want to be looking at a list of our goals and see whether they were achieved or not. So this sheet I listed out 5 goals as just drafts to get you thinking. We can come up with, 10, 15,
So
whatever we wanted.
I haven't read this yet, David, but I saw, we talked briefly before, earlier today.
Mhm.
And take, for example, in this one, goals, the facilities as a good example, all right? Which segues from what you were talking about right here, okay? This sets a nice overall, here's, geez, we want you to recommend how to do things, do short-term capital and long-term capital needs, identify areas of cost savings opportunities and so forth. So that's a strategic, a bit of a strategy or policy. And then the practice or the tactic is, okay, take a look at all the phone bills we've got and hey,
Right.
have the town accountant list all those out, what the numbers are, who uses the phone, whether in fact we need that particular phone that we're paying every month, and that's a task that
Right,
rolls
that's a
out of your
task,
office.
and that's what this, these are tasks that we've worked on and completed or
Yeah.
still to work on.
Yeah,
But these I can fit into, the goals that the selectmen
Yeah.
want to achieve. So
Yeah.
when Mike talks about, reviewing or reviewing the certain utilities or the telephone system or something, it feeds into here under procurement, evaluate all existing inspired town contracts, as well as identify other cost savings opportunities involving utilities, joint purchasing, and regionalized efforts for delivering services.
yeah.
So
see.
then I categorize, I tie it to that goal
Yep,
and come up with the things that we need to work on that.
Mhm.
yeah.
When I say we, I mean Diane and I,
Yeah.
and Jeannie.
So I think that, so I think what we're trying to do is ultimately get our own version of all of that stuff with this type of thing as the cover sheet. Would you say
Right.
that's a fair objective of what?
Yeah, I think you
we're
would want to
trying
start
do?
big picture. If you think economic development is a priority and you have certain things that would like to be done in that
Yeah.
vein, then,
Yeah,
That's not
That-
really on this chart. I was gonna mention that economic development. would
yeah,
be
no,
a
I just,
Category.
I put this together as a draft of.
Understood, yeah,
things-
no, but I think that would be a good category to have on here and maybe move the point you made about exploring a water district to economic development along with some other things that probably ought to be done.
Right, yeah.
Well, my 2 cents is if I look at goals 1 through 5, these look like town administrator goals compared to the stuff we were working with Jim Purcell. I mean, for example, on the Jim Purcell one, goal number 1 was strengthen the role of the town administrator. And that's not an express goal carried forward. But even 15 minutes ago, we took a vote over holiday hours that forwarded that goal by strengthening the role of the town administrator. Yet that's not a town administrator goal. It's not your responsibility to strengthen your own role.
Mhm.
It's the Board of Selectmen's responsibility. So there may be goals for the board
Mhm.
that are different than the goals for the town administrator. These 5 goals look to me like things that are town administrator oriented goals, things that he can work on and he can achieve the results. But there are others that are beyond his
so.
I think he's looking for guidance from us, Paul, in terms of implementing some of the items that he's got listed after goals, and I think we should talk about those and give him some
Yeah.
guidance. I mean, we can't just be process-oriented or structure-oriented. We've got to deal with the issues the town's facing directly. I mean, and as far as that vote we just took, I mean, another way of looking at that is we arguably weakened David's role. David has an employment agreement, which I think probably gave him the authority to do that anyway. I don't know that we needed to vote. It was, it reinforced the fact that we want him to make those decisions, but another way of looking at that is he already had the authority and he didn't really need to come to us except to tell us what he was planning to do.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think, David, you are looking for, geez, you guys what do you want me to do?
Well, I
Right?
will-
Isn't that part of it?
Well, I will say on the hours thing, normally, I mean, it was brought up in this meeting by an outside person, and so I brought it back into the
Yeah,
meeting. But
that's fine.
normally, we would have come up on that date, and I probably would have just talked to the chair and said, here's what I was thinking of doing.
Yeah.
And it would have just been a one-on-one conversation, but.
You're both pointing in the right direction here. I guess
Right.
one of the things that I think would be valuable, we have to give David some better direction here, but not piecemeal. So this gives, this approach, which he's drafted, to the extent, and once we've had a chance to look through these things, it's gonna stimulate some thought. We'll come back and maybe we add a couple of items. But one of the key things that really is beneficial to the town here is David's the fresh face. He's got a fresh set of eyes looking at everything we do. So, for example, I mentioned to him today, geez, take a look at, I call it the compliance aspect of I would throw compliance as another item here. We've got this wonderful operating procedures of the Board of Selectmen. Where can we improve adhering to these that we've established, or that? Where our financial policies, our bylaws, our personnel administration plan, where are the areas that the town really needs to work better, and how can we as a board help facilitate that? So that would be one of the things. And none of it can happen immediately as much as we would like it to. So we have to also respect that. It's a work in progress.
So maybe you would, like Paul was talking, that on some of the goals, you might want to step back even further, bigger picture than these items, that these might be objectives towards achieving a greater goal.
Yeah.
If you look at the TA position, it says strength and role. All of those objectives were complete, but it's the same role that existed before. So,
Doesn't that require a bylaw change
right.
State statute, too.
in terms of the TA rule?
Yes.
Right, so all of these things were done, but.
But if you look at this list, it says we're giving up on that. Or we're leaving it to that special committee to come in, so that it's.
Where does it say that?
By not saying in here that we are going to be looking, and not, I'm looking at the last page.
Yeah, so are you proposing we add because I'd support that, you're proposing we add a goal that says that we would want to work on ways
Not
to.
yet. First, I thought
Okay.
this was only to kind of highlight issues.
I think that was just to get you thinking, and we'd come back in another workshop with our ideas, or you can email them directly to me and I can compile them.
Even before you change structure, it seems to me some clarity of how you can do more of what you already have the authority to do, and how we can help you do that, and how we can help provide the clarity of these are the things that we find important that you already have the authority to go do. Maybe I'm saying the same thing, but over and over.
I think a year ago, we decided that strengthening the town administrator was an important goal. And so it's sort of still in effect until we change it. And we now have him doing much more on the budget process. And we have this arrangement with advisory that, again, leads towards strengthening the town administrator. And we're doing that without a bylaw. We're doing that ad hoc to see how it goes, and hopefully it's going to be very successful.
Yeah.
And then we build on that next year. So you're right, there's a lot that we can do by pushing with the tools that we have. But I'm suggesting that there's a whole series of goals that are really selectmen goals, that are under our contract with the town administrator. We have to set goals for him so that we can tell him where to go and measure his performance and give him feedback as to how far you're going on those goals and whether at the right speed.
I understood that's what this table was that David gave us. That's what I thought that was.
In my contract, it says that we jointly determine goals and we measure ourselves afterwards.
Yeah.
So, jointly determining the town administrator's goals, whether they're my goals or I see my goals as the board's goals. I'm not working on anything
so
that's.
And I'd rather you do it than us do it. So.
But I don't know.
But there are some goals that are joint goals. The thing about economic development or preserving the character of the town or strengthening the town administrator's job or improving the efficiency of government as a whole. Those are joint goals, but the other goals are really pretty clearly town administrator goals, like procurement, evaluate all existing and expired town contracts for recommended improvements. I don't see the Board of Selectmen specifically undertaking that.
No, we're going to give David some direction on that, hopefully.
Yes.
I mean, we're the executive board, he's the staff and the implementer, right? He's the administrator, he's the person who runs things in town hall. And so we have to give him guidance on what we think are the important priorities for the town to execute. He's given us a list of things that David thinks are important or that have occurred to him as things that should get done. And, you know, I think if not tonight, sometime we need to read through these and evaluate them for what they are. And there may be other things, Paul, that you're talking about that are structural or that get into, you know, a different level of, you know, it's less hands-on, it's more about organizational and structure and authority, and those are important things for us to do too. And I agree with you, that's less within David's job description. It would be harder for him to do that himself. But I see us as having a role that's equally important on both sides.
Yes, no question, I agree.
So would you say we have a homework assignment to read through these and come up with some additional thoughts to how we would supplement the TA specific as well as the selectmen types of larger picture items?
I borrowed this from, it was a town manager rating sheet, but the thoughts are different than what was in the sheet before.
Okay.
So, but the idea came from a town manager rating sheet. But that's, you know, what I'm trying to do is to be working on things that are tangible and
Yeah.
we can look back and say, yeah, it was done.
Right.
Measurable things that we can point to. And the board's goals are a little more esoteric and big picture that may not be as measurable, but they're achieved through a lot of things like here.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
if you're doing a planning study or a master plan, you have goals, you have objectives, you have implementation items, and they're, you know, I mean, structurally, the way this is set up, David, is probably not as useful as it would be if you had each item, each item as a line item that you could address each item as an implementation item, for example, or as a goal, or as an overall objective. And we should, you know, we can be thinking in those terms, in terms of some of the things we want to see done with the town government and with, you know, to improve the town. And they may not all be things that we want to take on ourselves, or even through David. There may be some things where we think it's important to delegate them to other committees, or to ask other committees that are elected bodies perhaps to take them on, you know, in the interest of everybody pushing the same way or rowing with the same oar, or whatever you want to have as a metaphor, which I think we're pretty good at in this town. But
Right.
So maybe go back through, you know, those ones I printed out and see which things
Yeah, and
you think that the
just,
board should
you know,
recommit
identify the
to.
things that are important to us. You know, each of us have sort of, if we were king for a day, what would we like to, which direction do we think we ought to be going as a town? And what things are important to be done on a day-to-day basis? And we add those to the pot and see
Sure.
what stays in. Because I think, you know, you have a perspective from, you know, an interesting perspective. Paul's got a unique perspective. We all have different.
Right.
yeah.
You know, and the thing is, we just don't want to get you confused, spinning your wheels, running in one direction one day and in another direction another day. And so I think it's a great effort to help clarify that.
Well, I think we're spinning a lot of wheels, but we're getting,
Well, there's a lot,
there's a lot to do.
There was a
yeah.
lot of pent-up demand for wheels to be spun.
Yeah.
So that's what you got
Yeah.
yourself into.
It's not
here.
staying in one place, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to adjust what you just said a little bit. It's not, I don't feel the town administrator is spinning his wheels in the sense of going nowhere.
Right.
I think you've been accomplishing a lot. I particularly like how when a citizen has an inquiry, you address the inquiry, you respond to it, you give them progress reports. I think that's just a wonderful add-on that we we
Yeah.
didn't have before. And I particularly like how the chair steps in and addresses the same types of things when citizens have complaints. We have these addressed rather than, in the past, sometimes these things got lost, didn't get anywhere.
away.
Yeah, well, but it seems like a really effective system where,
Yeah.
where between the two of you, you get a response out there so that citizens know where we're going. So I don't see that spinning of wheels, but it's very time consuming to
Yeah.
deal with all the stuff that people come at
Yes.
you with.
Which just detracts from the kind of priorities we're trying to give David, unfortunately. So, you know, maybe we can talk about this. Maybe there's a way to set up a system that takes less time to respond to citizen complaints, and, you know, we deal with the consequences, but we get further down the roads that we need to get down. I mean, you can have a few people in a town our size who can take an extraordinary amount of the administrator's resources on issues that are personal to them, but really don't have a lot of town-wide impact. And that's a shame. I mean, everybody's entitled to be heard, but at some point you have to, you know, set priorities that are important for the bulk of the people.
Right, right.
All right, well,
So I think it's just, you know, this is the first
yeah.
step in talking about it, and we should talk again. And if there were thoughts, or if you wanted to revisit these things and bring them all back and have comments or forward comments to me, or
Well, I think,
I'll continue working on it.
I think what we should do is do our homework, come forward to you with comments directly as individuals, but then be prepared to have you know, a meeting, another workshop that's devoted, you know, the meeting is devoted primarily to this, because it is important, and it's important for us to articulate what we
Right.
think ought to be done and so forth.
Yeah.
So we put that on a future agenda night. You know, tonight, we bit off an awful lot here with,
Yeah, Diane,
Just a footnote to what you just said, where we had a process in the past where individuals went and gave their suggestions. That's how the names got here. So when we had a meeting and there was a goal,
okay.
you know, go to the moon, we wonder, well, where did that come from? And then if it had a name next to
That
it.
would be Mike,
Yeah.
Mike's
traveling dude.
I understand that, Paul. I just think in terms of whatever the final document is, it should be a Board of Selectmen
Yeah,
document.
exactly.
It shouldn't
Yeah,
have
yeah,
individual
I agree.
names on
I
it.
agree.
Yeah.
This is fine because David found it in his files, but
right,
what is, yeah.
yeah.
All right. So you were saying something about looking up towards the future here, when that might happen or something?
No, I was just gonna say that Diane and I first started taking, you know, the list of things that we needed to do.
To-do list, if you will, yeah.
Yeah, the to-do list, and I started cataloging them, and then I just realized it was hours, and we said, you know, what are we doing? I'm not even fitting them into, you know, a past
Yeah,
document or.
Yeah.
That's why I think,
anything. So
David,
it's
if you line itemed each of those to-do items, and along with whatever else we end up coming up with, it would be possible and probably not difficult, at least, it won't be difficult to do, it may be difficult to talk it through, but
Right,
we'll
right,
be
right.
able to prioritize them, and all of a sudden you can set up categories and priority
Right.
lists, and who's gonna take care of things, and now you've got a spreadsheet that gets you through the next
Right.
year and more, probably.
Right, and it helps with budgetary decisions, it helps with,
yeah.
it actually even would help on a daily basis of when somebody comes in and says, you know, we want to pull this out, we want to move it here or there. Well, that's not, you know, I could attribute it to something that's a goal. Well, that's a very low priority right now, why don't you go do this? And I'm not talking about our office, but in, you know, general between police, fire, CM&D,
Sure.
inspections and conservation.
Well, I'm glad you pulled all this historical information together, because
Yeah, that's interesting to me.
I look forward to studying this and then seeing where we go from here. And again, you know, we got this thing.
I mean,
and
there
we
may,
got
there,
bylaws and-
there are probably, there's probably a lot more documents. This is just what's on my computer.
Right.
Hey, Paul, a question, which I think you probably have the historical context for, but these operating procedures, there's a lot of things in these operating procedures, some of which seem like operating procedures, and some of them, which, like the liquor licensing, seems like they're really regulations of the board. Here's one that's actually called administrative regulations. And then we've got up in front things that seem more like they're bylaw type items, how selectmen are elected, and the fact that they have to be sworn, which isn't really
a policy of this board, that's state law. And I'm just wondering how we got to this document, and also just from the public standpoint, I think it's wise to break out regulations and have them available as regulations rather than in the back of this document that somebody might never think to look in if they were trying to figure out how to get a liquor license or petroleum license or whatever. I mean, did this kind of come together organically, or was it intentional that it came? Yeah. Yeah.
It was intentional, and what we were dealing with was prior rules and regulations of the board.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were all kinds of rules that, you know, started with one page, and then other pages get added to it, and then there were other pages with different type font added 10 years later.
Right.
Kind of contradicted what was before. And so Jim decided he was going to take all of these things, which were basically office operating procedures,
Mm-hmm.
about how we get things done, and put it all into one place
Right.
for the board, and the board adopted it.
Well, so here's where I'm coming from, and you will appreciate this as somebody who represents cities and towns. We've got licensing policies and procedures, we've got fee provisions for stable licenses, and we've got alarm regulations that provide for fees. These are really regulations. They're not
They're
policies
all-
and procedures, and
They had already been adopted.
so they've been
as
adopted as regulations, and it would be good to codify
Years
these as
ago.
regulations.
As one.
Yeah, well, not necessarily behind a cover that says operating procedures of the Board of Selectmen, but actually as town rules and regulations under the Board of Selectmen. Something that when somebody goes in and gets the regulations the way they would the subdivision regulations or the zoning bylaw, they could also get a package that tells them about the things the Selectmen has underneath them. I just, you know, as somebody who goes into cities and towns for various things, it's hard to find regulations like this, and
What's missing was just the public hearing and the adoption. Instead, the way the board went, because we had limited resources of the town administrator.
mm-hmm.
This was something that we adopted at a meeting without having the hearing. The difference
Yeah, I think I'm just
policy.
suggesting breaking it in half.
I think that's a great idea. All I focus on are really pages 1 through 7 for
Right,
for
and
this
that's sort of an
discussion.
internal,
Yeah.
that's an internal document, and the rest of
Yeah.
this
Is
probably
what you're
should
doing. Yeah.
go someplace else.
Good idea. So,
That's all, that's more the public document. It's a procedural point or
Right.
a,
yeah. So we
like
can
there
amend
you-
this, when we do our thing on this, let's include that, how we
Mm-hmm.
pull this apart, basically. All right? How's that sound?
yeah, it sounds good.
All right, so we have a homework assignment, and we'll give ourselves just the right amount of time before the meeting when we follow up with this,
Yeah.
And-
whatever that amount of time is.
And I wanted to bring up one thing which I said a few weeks ago I'd bring up, which is that I think maybe it's our board, but some board in town should start to prepare a warrant article for a zoning amendment that would let charitable events take place. You know, and I'm thinking particularly of the Chamber of Commerce's, you know, what's it called, the Sherborn Business Association's
Yeah,
annual festival.
Brewfest thing.
Brewfest, which has come into the zoning board a couple of years in a row. And it's been difficult to figure out what provisions of zoning need to be addressed by that. And I think it would just be cleaner if we had, you know, a discussion, and either through our board or in conjunction with the planning board or somebody amend that bylaw so that if they want to come in and get a special permit, some board, whether it's us or the zoning board, is empowered to do that clearly, and there's less controversy over it. I know some of the zoning board members would appreciate that as well. They feel kind of put
Yeah.
on the spot by that.
And they'll be here the 21st.
Well, the planning board will be.
planning board will.
Yeah,
not
planning
the zoning
board,
board,
right.
So I think that's great. That's just an NOI. That's one of those
but, yeah, and I mean,
notices of intent. So the question is who's
that's the
carrying
thing.
ball on
Right,
that?
right, and I guess my question is that something that you two think this board would want to sponsor, would be in a position to sponsor, or should we try to get either the zoning board or some other board to sponsor it?
I have no problem sponsoring it here. It
Okay.
all makes great sense to me, so. if-
Yeah, I
if
think-
it's
I think
what-
it's along the
I looked
lines
at
of
Paul, if he has.
Economic development and all the
yeah,
rest of it.
Yeah.
But I have no problem supporting charitable events in town. but it might be better to work through the planning board.
Planning board would be a great idea. That's fine, if they
Good,
want to
so-
take that on. Yep.
So, I mean,
And I can talk to Higley about that,
Oh.
to John Higley, chairman of the planning board.
Yep. And again, they're here next week,
Oh, we can talk to him
so
then.
we'll talk to them then. That's right. I think that's great we're bringing them in. All right, so do
Yeah,
we have
and-
anything else, David? Yes.
no, my vision is if we can get the goals set, it also helps me organize when I'm working with all
So would we
those
say
committees.
sometime in the early December timeframe to come back and have the workshop on this? You know,
Yeah, it would
in the
be.
first half of December meeting?
Probably the first meeting in December,
Okay,
yeah,
that works. That work for you?
Sure.
yeah. And,
And whatever pressing issues. And then we're segueing into budget season and
right.
warrants and all that kind of fun
And
stuff.
I've issued, the town accountant's letter will be going out, and I have a section on her letter for Board of Selectmen departments requesting narratives and explaining the impact of a 5% reduction in their budget, a 0% increase in their budget, and then basically an open wish list with cost estimates of what, you know, sometimes there might be, somebody might identify a program that might have a little upfront cost that could have a bigger
Bigger benefit.
payoff,
Yeah.
and we could weigh it against the other
Great idea.
items, so, yeah.
Excellent.
That reminds me about our free cash certification. It was supposed to have been done,
October 30th.
I think, October.
October
31st.
31st, yeah.
Was our deadline. Where are we in that?
I know it's not certified, and I'll have to verify that it was,
Is it
Well, she
submitted?
was
I
gonna
think it
provide
was
us what
submitted
she
to-
was submitting as well.
okay.
Because that was, give us the pretty good idea what the
Yeah.
number was. The other thing, just another reminder, for her to put that 2013 report up on the, complete that so we can get up on the website, right?
Okay.
No, what's up there were those two sheets, which were great, those little summary sheets, but I keep asking for that, whatever that darn report, the June 30th report, the final report of June 30th, that she had presented to us back in August or whatever. So I just,
That might be a
Want that-
communication thing.
Is that,
Yeah.
we don't have, I'm taking it, we don't have a computer network where David has access to that
no,
information?
and the report is, it's that written report, it's the monthly report she was providing us. It was for the year end. It was
Right, no, I get it,
you know,
it's
and-
been
and
produced.
she keeps.
It should be
so that
accessible
should be
to our
up there.
town administrator, and,
Yeah, so just a reminder on that.
Yeah, and,
And the free cash, if you can get the free cash submission number, as soon as you can get that.
I know we were meeting with the auditors last week and this week,
Oh,
so she should have the
she had
numbers
jury
nailed
duty
down.
and
yeah,
holiday.
that was unfortunate, that was a
But I mean, the auditor,
day out of the
Yeah.
other cycle.
when I met with him today, he only pointed one issue that he thought has been an annual problem for us. And so we discussed some options about that. And it's something simple to cure. Basically, there's no revenue, there's no circle of verifying revenue. So like when our office does a turnover to the treasurer's office and it goes into the revenue, that monthly revenue report doesn't come back down to our office to be reconciled against what we
Oh.
thought we put in there.
Mm.
Well, that's a pretty big error. If we send out what we think is $100,000 and it comes back that we only contributed 1,000, that suggests, somebody made a typographical error and put the decimal in the wrong place.
Well, the auditors have said that that issue has been
Pointed out.
raised each year, but,
And which task, I mean, who would be tasked with making sure that that happened?
well, the town accountant has to print a report out of the system, not create a separate report, in an Excel. It has to be directly out of the system, so we know what actually went into the system.
Okay.
And then that report, the town accountant sends that report out to each department of the revenue items that
Were collected
they're
that month.
related to their department.
Yeah.
So, we've pretty much wrapped up that whole fee structure. I can put that on an agenda and come in and talk about that, and that has the fees all broken by departments. So, I mean, we could start it. It's a very simple thing to
Yeah.
start. It just hasn't been done.
Right.
But that's, the auditor was very positive about everything else, and he thought it was very, very likely all the financial statements and everything would be to us by the end of December.
So we should be
would
pretty
have-
good, and we should be confident then that the free cash number that's based on all those numbers should be fairly.
Right, there's nothing hanging those up as
Submission,
far as
yeah.
closing out last year, yeah.
Good.
But just to confirm, they have been submitted to Department of Revenue.
We don't know that.
I can't verify that, because I don't recall if she told me that or not, so I have to verify it.
I don't think we got any correspondence that said that.
No, we haven't seen anything, so we don't know that she did or not.
I would think
We
that if she
expected
knew
she
the
was going to.
auditors were coming in last week and this week, that she probably would have held off on her free cash and probably worked with the auditors and then sent it into the
I see.
Department of Revenue. That's just a guess, but,
Well, the moment that she's made a submission, we should know what that is.
yes, and I'll,
But we should also know when she's planning to submit it, if not submitted already.
right.
And I think we should have that as a committed date,
Right.
once again.
Just so that our listeners understand why this is important, knowing what this free cash number has important implications for our budgetary process. That's funds that we can use for capital projects. That's funds that we can, if necessary, use to reduce the impact of any tax increase that might come along. And we use it to fund our OPEB obligations and our,
We could pay our pensions early based on the discussion
Well,
tonight.
and this is based on numbers through June 30th, so it's not
That's
like they,
correct.
it's not like the books closed last week or 2 weeks ago.
That's correct,
Mhm.
yeah. And we've been asking for it for,
Well, we asked for it in June, and we promised it by October 31st.
okay. Anything else on this part of the agenda? Because I think there's only one thing left on the agenda, which would be
Motion to adjourn?
motion to adjourn. Do I hear a second?
second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Great, thanks. Nice job tonight, you all.
David, good job getting